Hey kids, shout out to my son's school, Westlake Academy. My name's Dave Lieber, and I am a columnist for the Dallas Morning News. And I am so glad you're here because I'm celebrating with you. I'm celebrating my 20th year in Texas, which I know none of you have 20 years yet, but you're working on it. And you know, I almost didn't make it for 20 years. I almost didn't make it 1 year because I'm not from here. And when the Texans would say, "Boy, where are you from?" I gave the wrong answer. I said, New York City. And they went, New York City. And what's the next line? Get a rope. I didn't know what that meant. If I did, I wouldn't be here today. And then I didn't understand what people were eating. I didn't understand the music. I didn't understand the way people dressed. I went to a Tex-Mex restaurant and the menu was in Spanish and I didn't know what anything was. Enchilados, chili con queso, margaritas. There was one thing I knew that if I ordered it, it would come attack me across the ceiling. Chimichanga! But the waitress told me to get something, and I pointed at it, and I told her I wanted those fajitas. And when the fajitas came, I didn't know what to do with the pancake and the white cream and the giant green glob of snot. And so she told me, you take the pancake, the tortilla, and you start to roll it up with everything. And I did. I rolled and I rolled and I rolled it so tight that when I took a bite out of the end, I had the world's longest, thinnest, tightest fajita, and everything shot out. I didn't care, though, because I was on drinking that margarita, you know. But I wrote about it in the newspaper, and people thought I was just stupid. I didn't know what about the clothing, you know. I asked for a cowboy costume at the Western store, and she yelled at me, and she said it's called a tire. And I asked her for a tire. And I got cowboy dungarees, and I got a snap shirt and a hat, and I got a boots that came in a white boot purse and a belt buckle as big as my butt. And I walked around like I was a cowboy, but nobody was fooled because I wasn't a Texan. I didn't fit in. I didn't know what made Texans laugh or cry. It was kind of sad, really. I got kind of stupid. I did something dumb. I thought maybe if I impressed everyone by riding a bull in a rodeo and writing about it in the newspaper, they would think I was cool. And so I locked in on that idea, and I practiced on my chair in my living room at home, reading a book and memorizing the pictures. And that night, Saturday night, I drove to Azle, Texas, and I got on that bull in my cowboy costume. And you know, how long is a good bull ride in Texas? 8 seconds. I was on that bull for 10 seconds. No, see, the bull didn't read my book. He didn't leave the stall. He froze for the first 8 seconds like this, and I didn't know what to do, but I kept dropping because my adrenaline wasn't holding me. And you can see the video of this on my website, yankeecowboy.com. This man comes up behind the bull and shoots, and the bull shoots out. And that's how I got the other 1.6 seconds. I was flying through the air longer than I was on the bull, but I didn't care because it was a glorious ride because I knew when I landed, all y'all were going to like me. Boom! And I landed, and I forgot the next chapter of the book, which started with the word run. And I just lay there. Luckily, I didn't get stomped. I wrote about it in the newspaper, and people thought I made way too much a big deal of 1.6 seconds. I had no friends. Nobody wanted to date this bull rider from New York, this jerk, this crazy, stupid writer. But you know, when you want something really bad and you're having a hard time struggling like I was, you got to try something new. And I did something that I didn't do much of before I got here, but I noticed Texans do it a lot. I got down one night and I prayed. I knew what to pray for. I prayed for a good, strong Texas woman. Because if I got a good, strong Texas woman, she'd take me around and introduce me to people and give me story ideas and edit my columns before they went into the newspaper. You know what happens when you pray in Texas? A week later, I got introduced to the most amazing woman of my life. Her name was Karen. Just that, a week later. And she came with 2 kids, a little boy named Jonathan and a bigger girl, 11-year-old named Desiree. And Jonathan, he met me at the door first time, and he looked like Dennis the Menace, and he looked up at me, and he said, "Hi, Mr. Lieber. Are you going to be my new daddy?" And I said, boy, let me in the house first, will you, man? Okay, nice to meet you. And then I say, hey, Karen, how are you? And then Desiree, the daughter, 11 years old, she comes out of the bedroom, and I look at her, and she looks at me, and I'm in my new cowboy boots, but she's taller than me. And she walks over to me, and she says, hello, little man. And she takes my chin in her mouth, and she says, I just want to warn you before you get too cozy with my mother, you better not hurt her feelings. I won't. And they had this dog, this little runt retriever who just absolutely was gnarling and snarling and hated me. And I tried to become her friend. And as I got closer, she went into a panic attack and started barking and biting her tail and let off this smell. And I said, what's wrong with your dog? They said, she hates men. And I said, how come? And they said, well, because she was abused by a man. He wanted her to be a hunting dog, and she was no good. And he said he's just going to take her to the pound and put her down. And Karen said, I rescued her. And I brought her home on Christmas Eve. And she's been happy ever since because there's no man here. And you're giving her flashbacks. Let me show you what Sadie looked like. The dog of my nightmares. You see? I tried so hard to win this dog over. I gave her bones and toys and took her for walks, and all she did was look at me and just go, hey, Sadie, I got a bone for you. It was sad, but she figured out the problem. This dog was a native Texan. That woman was the greatest woman I ever met. We were perfect for each other. She took me around, she gave me story ideas and helped me out and edited my columns like she knew journalism. That boy, he just wanted someone to go to games with and football and basketball, and we did. But that girl, Desiree, she was suspicious. She was suspicious of little man. So one day, because her father was kind of mean and he left him. So one day I took her to the mall and for no reason just bought her a pair of new shoes, and she said, why? And I said, because I love you and I'm here for you. And she turned to me in the car and she said, little man, there is hope for you. But the dog and I couldn't get along. After 6 months of dating this family and the boy and the girl and the dog, I decided to make it permanent. And since I had a column in the newspaper that I wrote 3 times a week, I decided to make my Sunday column in October of 1994 my marriage proposal. And it started out by me saying, here in Texas, I've met the woman of my dreams. Unfortunately, she lives with the dog of my nightmares. And then I told a story about how we met and the boy and the girl. And then it ended with the words, will you marry me? And that morning when that paper hit the driveway, I drove to her house in the dark and I knocked on her door and I woke Karen up and I sat down on the edge of her bed and I read her that story. And I'll just share with you the final paragraph so you can see how I popped the question. Finally, one day I decided to see the world through Sadie's eyes. I was a big, smelly brute who invaded her turf and came between her and her mother, a brute who didn't like her. So that day I sat down beside Sadie and told her I was sorry. Sorry for the way some mean man had apparently treated her, and sorry for how I hadn't shown her the proper understanding. I'll try to love you, Sadie. We're both lucky that Karen found us. I love you. I love you. I said it over and over, and those big expressive eyes looked up at me, and she licked my face. Since that day, I always tell Sadie when I'm about to go, so as not to startle her. And Karen says, I'm glad you and Sadie have made peace. But now I see the hole in my life needs more than just a dog to fill it. Karen, there's something magical about you, me, the girl, the boy, and even your doggone little dog. I love you, Karen. I'll always tell you when I'm about to go so as not to startle you, and I promise to come back. I'll always come back. I want to stay forever. I really do. Karen, will you marry me? And I looked up, and she was in shock. Her face was frozen. There were tears coming down her cheeks, but I finally saw her mouth go like this, which I knew wasn't a. And then the kids woke up and they knocked on the door and I let them in and I said, I'm so glad you're awake because I just proposed to your mom in the newspaper and we're getting married. And they said, you're a liar. And I said, no, look, there it is. Will you marry me? And they went, and I got down and I proposed to the boy. John, will you marry me? And he said, you are going to be our daddy. And we hugged. And I proposed to the girl. I said, Desiree, will you marry me? And she said, I guess so, little man. And then Jonathan said, propose to the dog. And I did. I got down on her bed and next to her bed, and I just said, you know what just happened here, girl. Will you make it unanimous? Will you marry me? And she looked up at me with those eyes, and she went, That's how I got engaged on a vote of 3-1. So the sun came up, and people read the story in the newspaper, and they wanted to know the answer. And there was no internet yet, so all they could do was put it on an electronic message board on Airport Freeway. It said, read the Star Telegram, time 4:53, temperature 81 degrees. Karen said yes. And that's the day I became a Texan, because suddenly I had kids, and I was have a wife, and I was going to have a dog that didn't like me, and I wasn't some crazy New Yorker who didn't know what chicken fried steak was anymore. So what made me a Texan was suddenly me getting a son like you boys and a daughter like you girls. And that made me a complete person for the first time in my life. And I'll just end by telling you that Karen and I have our own child now. And he's 16. He goes to their school. And his name's Austin Lieber. And you know why I named him Austin, right? Because Waco and Waxahachie Lieber don't sound that good. Thank you very much, kids. It's been great to meet you. Thank you.